Hey, my friends, I'm Randy Vaudry, nurse practitioner, and here with my good friend Christina,
yes,
who's also a nurse practitioner, and we're back on our podcast about treating people, not just treating them. So, Christina, where have you been? How you been the last little while?
I've been good. I am so excited that it's finally warm. We live here in Idaho, and we go from snowing to 90-degree weather in a week. So yesterday it was 90 degrees. Got to have a barbecue, got to go on a walk.
Yeah, for those that are not from Idaho, the standard joke here is if you don't like the weather, just give it 5 minutes because it will definitely change.
Yes.
So we know that's the case, right?
Yeah. What have you been up to?
Well, in the post-COVID environment, right, depending on when you listen to this podcast, we're recording it right after the mask mandate has been lifted and people are getting back into their social gatherings and so forth. And it's really interesting to start interacting with our patients, kind of like we did traditionally, and start talking about how do we strengthen people's health after the COVID pandemic, and what types of things can we do to prevent them from fading back into the disasters that we just experienced, from social distancing to chronic immune problems, and everyone was sick, and the social isolation. And so I think that I'm just trying to put that back together with my family and my kids and my practice. So
I do think it's an amazing time for us. We've always really liked to talk about preventative medicine. How do you stay well? Don't wait until you get sick. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity because people's ears are open now to what are some things that we can do to keep healthy. And we've all been exposed now to that just fear of getting sick. So now we get to really have people listen to us, and people are coming in more now for preventative type things. So
one thing I thought was so interesting about COVID, and we're not going to talk a ton about COVID, but I will make this comment, that everyone knows that there was a big debate about what could you do if you got COVID to help make sure you didn't end up in the hospital. And there was a ton of treatments that tossed around, all the way from vitamin D and zinc and vitamin C and ozone therapy and ivermectin and hydrochloroquine and IV Resdemivir and antiviral medications or antiparasitic. I mean, it went on and on and on. And I thought it was so interesting that the real brainiacs of the world over and over and over says, nope, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. That won't work. That's not safe. That hasn't been proven. Mm-hmm. And in the end, many patients were left wondering, what the heck am I supposed to do?
Right.
You've told me everything I can't do. What do you do? Are we just expecting people wait till they get sick and end up in the hospital and then cross our little fingers and say prayers are going to get better? That is never how I've practiced medicine. I've always been really thoughtful about, you have a virus that isn't going to respond to antibiotics. Well, here's all the things we can do to strengthen you. And so I thought that was really interesting getting through the pandemic, and it's perfect for our discussion today, because our goal is to talk about how do we strengthen the human body, the human system, so that you don't get sick in the first place. And if you do get sick, the symptoms are minimized. The symptoms don't overrun you and end up in the hospital on a ventilator, getting your last rites.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about us being here at the Country Health Clinic is there are so many different types of alternative treatments. And one that I think is very interesting and does play a role with viruses is UVB light therapy. So what does that even mean? What does that stand for?
Yeah, everyone asks, what is UVB therapy? UBI stands for ultraviolet blood irradiation. It's a mouthful. It's basically taking a very specific wavelength of light or color of light and shining it on blood and then infusing it back into your own system. That's really simply what it is.
So what does that look like? Well, for instance, why would I come in and have that type of treatment specifically done?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the wrong question. What you should ask is, why wouldn't I come in and get that treatment? Okay?
I like that.
So here's how it happens, functionally. Everyone says, what is it? When we draw blood, we would draw about 60 cc's of blood. So instead of just drawing a little vial for your wellness visit and you get a little test tube of blood, we pull about 60 cc's into a large syringe. It sounds like a lot of blood. It's actually not that much. We take that and we push it into an IV bag with normal saline so it's very diluted. and then we hook it up to an IV, and before we run it right back into your own body, we run it past an ultraviolet light. And we let that light shine on that blood. That's it. It's that simple.
Really? So what's it doing, or what types of things is it good for?
Okay, so we think that it has positive benefits for many interventions. Now, I want to mention, first of all, it's not FDA approved for the treatment of any specific illness. So our goal isn't to overstate or overtreat and then not have the evidence to back it up. It is a therapy that's been around for probably 80 years. And we know it's very, very safe, right? So we're not infusing chemicals, and we're not infusing potions and pharmaceuticals and so forth. You're basically pulling your own blood out, exposing it to ultraviolet light, and putting it back into your system. So the question is, what's the benefit? Everyone knows the number one way to raise your vitamin D is to do what?
Go out in the sun.
Get sunlight.
Okay.
The reason we go out in the sun is that ultraviolet light, specifically UVB, hits our skin, and there's a chemical reaction in our skin where we convert our own cholesterol through a series of reactions into a hormone called vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is a vitamin, is a hormone. It's probably not very much like a vitamin. Let me explain the difference. A vitamin is used in a chemical reaction to strengthen or carry out that chemical reaction. A hormone is a chemical messenger. A hormone goes into a cell and interacts with the DNA so that that DNA is expressed and sends out the messages to all the cells to behave in a certain way. And that's basically what vitamin D does. Vitamin D is a very powerful hormone that actually changes the way our DNA is expressed. For a long time, we've been told, cut your cholesterol, right? Drive your cholesterol down as low as you can get it. Well, that's going to negatively impact your vitamin D because you make vitamin D from cholesterol. Number two is we've been told, don't go out in the sun. Be careful. And instead, we sit in front of fluorescent lights in buildings all day long. And look how I'm dressed today. It's 90 degrees outside, but I work all day long inside. And then when I go outside, I'm wearing a dress shirt, right? So in order for me to get a little bit of vitamin D, I'd have to take my shirt off and run around in my loincloth at high noon to get that exposure to the ultraviolet light when that sun is the hottest. And yet any dermatologist in town will say, be very careful about doing that. We got to lather you up with all this sunscreen to block that UV light because we don't want you to get sunburned. So I'm not talking about sunburns, but I am talking about absorbing those healing rays of light from the sun to create that conversion of vitamin D. So I'm going to back up because I'm talking too much. But basically you asked, what does it do? Does it then create vitamin D in the system? We don't really think that it does that. The reality is we don't know exactly what it does, but we do believe that it has an anti-inflammation effect. So for all of you out there that are taking ibuprofen on a routine basis because you're achy, this could make a difference for you. For all of you out there who you've probably heard of oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is what happens when water and sunlight get on the bumper of your car and create a chemical reaction and it rusts, right? Oxidative stress is a chemical reaction that happens in our body that breaks our cells down. And so it can help slow or prevent the oxidative stress problem. It can help increase inflammatory disorders. And one of the beautiful things about UV light and red light is researchers from all across the world, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, MIT, they've talked about the healing quality of light, that it's an energy source. And when it enters our system in some way, it converts that photon of energy to ours. And almost without question, people walk out feeling invigorated. It strengthens the immune system. It just helps them be able to handle this harsh environment that we live in. So
could it be good for things like, and again, we don't want to put a diagnosis to a treatment. We're not trying to cure anything, but could it be helpful for things like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, autoimmune disorders? I even, in doing some research, was some things like Lyme's disease or different types of viruses, that it could be helpful for that.
Yes, we think this is actually where UBI shines. It shines in highly inflammatory disorders. So you talked about the autoimmune disorders,
Right.
and I mean, fibromyalgia, we didn't even know what causes fibromyalgia. There's lots of theories that maybe it's an inflammatory problem, maybe it's an infectious problem, maybe it's an oxidative stress problem. It's probably moderated by hormones. So we think that UVB or UBI really shines in inflammatory disorders and infectious disorders. So we just talked about COVID, right?
Right.
Where you're infected by a virus. Well, think of all the viruses out there. When people come to the clinic and I think, well, I've got a virus, I've got a sniffly nose and a fever. What virus do you have? Unless you want to spend $1,000 to figure out what the virus is, I can't tell you.
Right.
But our goal isn't necessarily to pinpoint you're infected with this virus, because at the end of the day, what are we going to do different? We're going to strengthen you. We're going to lift you. We're going to try to boost your immune system. We're going to try to boost your antioxidant system. We're going to try to decrease the inflammatory response. These are the types of areas where UBI really shines.
How long does the therapy take?
It's like maybe 45 minutes, right? Most of the time under UBI is set up. So you draw the blood, you put it into an IV bag. That takes about 10 minutes to get you all set up. And then you sit there and you just let gravity drain your own blood past the UV light right back into your own system. And you're only infusing about 200 cc's of fluid, 60 cc's of blood, maybe 150 cc's of fluid. So it's fast. It's like 45-minute treatment beginning to end.
And how often is there a protocol for how often it should be done?
That is all across the board, because we see people who come to us as a last resort. They've been treated for cancer, they've had chemotherapy and radiation, or they've been to 10 physicians because they've got chronic Lyme and they've tried long-term antibiotic therapy. We have seen people who've had strokes or massive heart attacks. They're diabetic and they got terrible peripheral neuropathy and they're wasted, and they've completely exhausted pharmaceuticals and conventional recommendations. And they're looking for something that's safe, holistic, maybe a little bit more natural related, and something that is designed to strengthen the system per se, not just a pharmaceutical that treats a symptom, right? Keep in mind, chronic disease has been boiled down to symptom management. And at the Doctor's Country Clinic, we're focused on treating the system and managing the system, not just the symptoms.
Right. Yeah. So this is something that could be used alone, or it could be used in conjunction with a lot of other things.
In fact, that's what I recommend. I think that when you have really complex medical and health challenges, you really can't rely on one intervention.
Right.
You've got to dial in how you eat. You've got to dial in your sleep. I mean, you're the ultimate sleep expert. You've got to dial in your vitamin and nutritional elements. There's got to be focus on stress management and antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. And we don't get any of those through the pharmaceutical.
Right. What I always like to say is mastering the basics, right? Getting down to the very basics. So many people are looking for a big overall answer. You know, what's the cure? What's the one thing that I can do to just be better? And it's never just one thing. Getting healthy is complicated. Staying healthy is complicated. And it takes effort and it takes time. And it is a lifelong process of learning and always doing something new, something good that's treating the very basics.
Yeah, and I think that right now in the after COVID environment, I've seen a lot of patients that say, I've got post-COVID fatigue.
Yeah,
or maybe they have chronic fatigue from Epstein-Barr, or cytomegalovirus, or Lyme, or whatever. I think that the time is primed where we have the whole nation, the whole world is thoughtful now about how can I strengthen my own system? Because when the next variant, the next flu season, the next whatever, you fill in the blank, when that rolls around, how can we strengthen you so that you're not a snowflake, that you just don't melt in the midst of a very complex environment? Because I mean, we all saw what happened. We closed the environment down, we socially distanced, the kids staying home from school. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm not sure that any of this strengthens the system.
Right.
I think we're too focused on the virus when we should be more focused on you. or you,
Yeah.
or how we strengthen the individual. And that's our goal. Invite people to be thoughtful about how we strengthen one another.
That's why it's so fun to work at the Country Health Clinic, is because they are so focused on what are all the things that you can do for yourself, not what can't you do. And we couldn't be at a better time in medicine, because this is what we've always loved to do, is teach people what they can do for themselves and how they can eat and how they can sleep and different supplements that they can take and how to manage stress and how to use some of these alternative type treatments. One thing that people always ask is, okay, well, what are the negative side effects? What are the downsides?
Well, I think this is another area that UBI really shines, is there's really not adverse reactions. There's been tens of thousands or even maybe hundreds of thousands. I don't know the actual number, because UBI is done all across the country. It's done across Europe. And there really isn't a really terrible side effect associated with it, because basically what we're doing is giving you your own blood, diluted into a normal saline IV solution with just a little bit exposure of light. And the amount of blood we're exposing is like 60 cc's.
Yeah.
So it's a teeny tiny amount. So,
Very little.
I mean, there could be a risk of soreness in your arm where you get an IV. Anytime you puncture the skin, there's a risk for infection, right? Those are the traditional risks that we would talk about if you were drawing blood or getting any IV therapy. But outside of that, I don't know that there's anything earth-shattering dangerous about this.
No risk of like allergic reactions, or because we're not putting anything into that IV. So it's not that your body could have some sort of negative reaction to what's being put in, because all it is normal saline, basically just sort of like water and your own blood. And so that's the other really awesome thing about it, is there's no chance of things like allergic reactions or.
Yeah, I think the safety profile is good. So, but our goal isn't to diagnose and treat on video. Our goal is to introduce the concept. And every one of you, maybe some of you have clotting disorders, or you have autoimmune, or you have whatever. Those things need to be taken into account as we talk through this, because maybe we would add a little heparin to it. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we could do to protect the individual, but those happen on a one-on-one basis when we're sorting through would a treatment strengthen your system.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that taught me a lot. I hope that it helped you guys out. If you guys ever have any questions, please let us know. We're both available. And come on into the Country Health Clinic if you are local, or even if you're not local. That's the other thing I really love about this clinic, is we meet people from all over the world. Literally.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to do a telemedicine consult. People call and say, hey, I want to ask a couple of questions. We're happy to jump on the phone with you. So click the links, follow the trail, and let's see if we can connect and help strengthen you.
Thanks for listening.